Oh, we're back. We have an interesting guest today. The area of AI is a hot topic. It's an area that I think anyone that tunes into the show hears me talk about quite often. It's an area that I think is going to sort of, well, this is a really bad term, revolutionize the space. I think anything and everything that can be automated probably will be automated. So today's episode is focused on AI and specifically AI within the content space, things that involve content creation, writing, and the augmentation of those capabilities. So just before I do, a little housekeeping. This week I'm home here in Toronto. Next week I'll be in San Francisco at the Velocity conference in San Jose. So if you're interested in being on the show, feel free to ping me on Twitter or any number of other social media platforms, and I'll try to get you scheduled into the live cast schedule. The big news of the week right now, I think, are some of the activities going on in San Francisco at the Cloud Foundry conference. Too bad I wasn't able to go to that, but you'll see lots of action and activity on the Twitter sphere around some of the things going on at that conference. But today, we're talking AI, and we have Bradley Silver from a Toronto-based AI company. For those you don't know, Toronto's become kind of a hub of AI companies. There was recently a chart put out by Element AI, and that sort of outlined the Canadian IT and AI scene, and it's huge. There's literally dozens and dozens of companies. One of the companies at the forefront of the Toronto AI scene is Atomic Reach, and we have the founder today, Bradley Silver, on the show. Bradley, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rue. Pleasure to be here. Good morning.
So you guys are doing AI. Everybody and their dog seems to be doing AI. I think my dog might have dog.ai as a domain. So what are you guys doing?
We are a content marketing optimization platform. So essentially what we've done is we have taught a machine how to read and think much like a human editor would, and then build technology applications in and around that AI functionality to enable marketers to make informed decisions that can be applied to the production and distribution of content marketing in a way that is much more closely related to an understanding of how the customer behaves. And I said that without using a buzzword.
Well, I throw in several buzzwords. It's interesting. So what you're doing is you're using AI or machine learning, I guess, to determine sort of the optimal content and a sort of assistant that helps create the content in a viral nature. Is that the general idea?
Yeah. So you think of language as a dynamic, living, growing, breathing thing, and we have a cultural and social bias towards language as individuals. It grows and changes as we manipulate it and change it within the constraints of our daily discourse. So the way we interact with our friends and family, we'll use words in cultural meaning, but not necessarily in a initially intended meaning. And so because the style of language is constantly adapting, words take on different meanings and may have multiple meanings. And so when it comes time to writing something, the words we put down on paper may be interpreted quite differently by an audience, very much so because of all those social, professional, and cultural biases. And so by teaching a machine how to understand the nuances of language and bring some intelligence into that construct, we're able to build tools that help communications specialists and marketers be much more specific and direct about the types of words that they choose relative to their intended meaning, and better understand the impact of those words on virality. So I write something, I have an intended outcome. Are the words that I've chosen really well suited for the intended impact that I am pursuing? And is that aligned with how my audience is really going to interpret what I've written?
So you've created a kind of editor of sorts that says, this content is going to be more efficient, more effective, and so on. It sort of is better. It's better at understanding the things that probably people aren't pattern recognition, things that will make your content go more viral. As a blogger, I'm always sort of testing sort of the different approaches to, headline writing, and adding a superlative in a headline, for example, will greatly increase the likelihood of someone clicking on the actual blog when it's syndicated on things like Google's news and things like that. So what you're doing is you're saying, based on certain structures, based on certain ways that people can communicate, you're going to optimize that. So this is almost like an augmented sort of editor for a writer. Am I interpreting this correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to characterize it. And I think a good example to use, if I said the word terrific, what does that mean to you?
No, it means great.
Could it mean terrified? Could it mean something scary?
I guess it depends on how it's used in what context. Now you have to say, so that's interesting.
And what happens if I use the word running? What's your association with the word running?
Leaving the room, getting out of Dodge.
So running with potentially a fear-based context, where it could be something like running for president.
Okay, so it's subjective.
Well, yeah, so running for president is probably a terrifying proposition anyway, but the context in which that word being used, running for president, running a terrific campaign versus running towards a business deadline, or we got to get out of Dodge. This is terrific.
It's funny you mentioned that, because certain political candidates and leaders have been very good at using sort of adjectives within their vernacular. Everything's terrific, everything's the greatest, the best. There's nothing in between that. And there was in particular a company in that sort of, some say was sort of instrumental in that, a company called Cambridge Analytica that basically said that they could sort of manipulate public discourse and basically push people to do or not do certain things using AI. Is that real? Is that hyperbole? Are we there yet? Is AI actually that smart, or are we just sort of fear mongering?
I think that there isn't one universal construct that we could say, use AI in this way and it will deliver this specific outcome. And I think that's the beauty of working with AI, and certainly the beauty within the model that we've created, where it's very context specific. So what you just described, and no offense to anyone, but it is essentially the foundation of marketing. We want to use words to communicate something to a group of people or an individual with a predictable desired outcome. And so we're not necessarily manipulating anyone, but we are trying to communicate something expressive, characterize something that we think will appeal to a group of people, engage them with the word choices that we make, and use that to impact some kind of a desired outcome. I think what we know about AI is that it gives us the intelligence to build adaptation. Adaptation in a macro sense, where we're constantly learning. We're using millions of data points to teach a machine how to think and read as much as we can like a person, and help us make decisions that are built on a data set that's just too big for a human brain to compute in real time. And then we do it at a micro level, where the adaptations are very much individual or audience specific. So, a word or set of words for one universe, and that's what I think, we were trying to explain in the conversation, could be interpreted very differently than a different segment. And so understanding the relationship between who you're speaking to, what it is they need, what it is you're trying to accomplish, is one of the key benefits of AI. So you don't need to think or use it broadly. It gives you a ton of flexibility and adaptation.
Back in the early days of television, there was this big sort of worry around sort of hidden messages and psychological sort of manipulation. You could secretly hide messages in a TV broadcast. A lot of that was disproven, and I don't think it was ever proven that you could actually do any of that. But there were several laws put in place that basically ban this idea of sort of hidden messages within advertising and television itself. You know, we've seen similar sort of discussions around AI kind of secretly pulling the strings and ultimately, you know, controlling us in ways that we're not even able to understand. And as you sort of alluded to, marketing in essence is about convincing people to buy or do something they may not have otherwise wanted to do. Is there a line, and where is that line?
Yeah, so that's a big philosophical question, and there's some ethical boundaries within that. So I think that's taking the conversation well out of the construct of AI for marketing. But I'd be interested, like, what is your opinion? Like, have you established in the conversations that you've been having, and I know you do a lot of writing and research. Do you have a sense of where those boundaries are?
I think there's a, you know, like anything, there's a great opportunity. It's a greenfield opportunity. I don't think this aspect of you know, AI sort of controlling the world that some of the sort of tech leaders have sort of alluded to is there yet. You know, where AI for most part is, you know, just advanced, you know, understanding, machine learning. It's not to a point where it's you know, doing the things that people are worried about. There's no Skynet at this point. Now the question is one of an evolutionary stance. You know, let's say we're in the first minute of a baseball game. You know, how important is the first minute of a baseball game? Probably not that important, maybe unless you hit 15 runs and you win the game because of it. But generally speaking,
Marco Estrada might disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's important. I don't know. But the reality is there's a lot of companies popping up. Everybody's trying to assert themselves as a leader in a particular segment of the market. I think what we're going to see is a few major players emerge in this space. You know, whether or not it's dangerous, I'm leaning towards not that dangerous. I think it's going to make our lives better, more efficient. You know, it's going to, you know, augment us in ways that we probably couldn't even imagine. And I don't think necessarily it's just for the worst. You know, a lot of people like to focus on negative. Sci-fi in particular likes to focus on those sorts of things. But I think for every negative, there's probably a positive, or there's probably a lot more positive. So,
yeah, you know, I'll tell you what I think. You know, my philosophy and attitude is, in general, towards these type of things is I don't believe in anything that breaks the law. So I believe we have a criminal code that is applied to our society and that sets some boundaries for us. I think within that construct, I believe in self-policing and complete freedom. So, you know, we had this exact discussion when broadband adoption emerged, and we were debating, you know, what is the role of the internet in our lives, and who's going to police it, and what are the rules that should be applied to it. And I think by its very nature, inherent in what it is, and as internet citizens and people who are pioneering in the digital space, I think, you know, by its very nature, it gives us the freedom to explore and innovate and push the boundaries, and gives us the ability to self-police. So I think that anything that is abhorrent or criminal in our physical world should be applied to what we do in our digital world. But I like the notion of the dung beetle. Have you ever seen a dung beetle in real life?
I think I've seen one on one of my kids, you know, nature shows.
So
pushing a ball or something.
Right. So, you know, I grew up in South Africa, and we went to the game park quite a lot. It was like a monthly thing for the family to do. You know, everyone talks about the big 7 or 8, and going seeing, you know, lions and leopards and wild dogs hunting, which, don't get me wrong, I mean, it's super exciting. But one of the more thrilling things for me as a kid would be to watch dung beetles, and I could spend hours watching them. So they would start at the bottom of the hill, and they would create these dung balls, and they would roll them all the way to the top. But if the dung beetle reached an obstruction along the way, the ball would fall, and it would begin the process again, and it would bump into the same barrier and fall down again. So we think of AI where we can say, okay, well, what are the inputs and information sources we could give to that dung beetle if it behaved more like a human? So it could make some decisions and use some inputs to alter its course and intelligently think its way to the top of the hill. So that would be our ultimate goal. In terms of where we are as a society and technologists in relation to AI, I think we're the dung beetle at the bottom of the hill still. We're barely scratching the surface, and so we have these fears and worries about where it's going to go. The opportunities for us are immense, and the improvements I think it will make to our lives and our world will be, there will be paradigm shifts as a result of this early work that we're doing in AI. Our relationship to the work that we do today will change, much like it has in the past, where you used to have someone with a chisel and a clay stone hammering words, and then a group of people carrying that enormous stone to somebody else who would have to read it and then respond. And so people don't do that anymore, but we changed our relationship to the medium and the ability and the characteristics of that medium, so we can spread words very quickly now, and we can mobilize people in different ways, and that created a whole set of new skills and education. And the same thing will happen as a result of AI. So some of the roles that we play in relation to it today will change, but new ones will emerge, and we'll be able to accomplish so much more. And I feel like that's the exciting part.
I think I agree with what you're saying. Just to take a step back for a moment, we've covered, the sort of your technological libertarianism. We've covered the future and past of AI. We're in the, I think we've thrown out probably a good half dozen metaphors. Let's discuss the sort of ecosystem here in Toronto. I think this is a really interesting story as well. There's a lot of AI companies popping up in Toronto. For some reason, we seem to be a kind of AI hub of sorts. There's several universities, there's lots of companies. What are your thoughts? Why is Toronto the place for AI?
I think it's like any similar environment. When you invest and you nurture and you give people access to education, information, and training, you build an environment that extends well beyond just education. And by saying just education, I think education is fundamentally important to the growth and success of a society and a culture and a country. So I'm very proud of what we have been able to accomplish in Canada and in and around the Toronto area specifically. And I think it's because we took the time to invest early and create an environment where people were given the opportunity to explore, research, learn, apply their thinking in innovative ways, that we're seeing the sort of second only, and I still think it's very early, but we're seeing the second tier of benefits. So we built an education system. We gave people the opportunity to participate in that education system. We provided an environment where people were given access to capital and grants. That capital was then deployed into our economy. Those individuals who spent all that time educating were then given an opportunity to build and innovate in a way that would build commercial opportunities, which gives us the ability to refunnel that capital back into the education system. And that stimulates growth and learning. So it's much like anything you take the time to invest in and build an infrastructure around. It builds long-term growth and social benefits to that environment. And so we did it early on, and now we are leading the charge, and we are all benefiting from it. And Toronto's become a hub for both education. And when I say Toronto, I mean it extends all the way out to Southern Ontario. But we've become a hub for something that we've nurtured and grown. And I know we'll continue to do it. And I think our whole universe here, especially in technology, is benefiting as a result. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, it certainly is. There's a lot of companies doing really interesting things. I think as I said, the Element guys, I saw $135 million raise this week. That's a impressive amount of money coming into the space. They're going to be obviously hiring a lot of people in the space. What sort of talent do you think? If you're a kid starting out, what do you look at? What technologies do you play with? How do you get involved in the space?
I really love the programs that are focused on teaching kids at a very early age how to code. I think not being able to code in, I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I am constantly preaching to them that this is the new illiterate. If you can't code, it's almost like, in my parents' generation when they were growing up, if you couldn't read, you literally were illiterate. So, I like those programs where we start at a very early age and teach kids the skills that they need and the math and science background. And most of all, I think the curiosity. Give them the curiosity to question the current state. Give them the means and the focus on exploring the unknown, and then give them the skills to challenge the status quo. So, I like those. I like starting. I think the foundation begins at a very early age, and it begins with those technical skills that you can, they're sponges. They are open to learning so much, and I think it grows from there.
Yeah,
And
right.
I don't know if that's exactly where you're going with the question, but for me, that's the most important.
I look at myself when I was, I think I was 8 years old. I was desperate for an Atari, which was the thing at the time. And my parents said, no, you're not getting an Atari. So instead, they bought me one of those Radio Shack Tandy computers.
Mm.
And I was so disappointed. A computer? What am I going to do with this thing? Anyway, so it turns out there was a lot you could do with that thing. Lots of games. And I taught myself how to program in BASIC, which actually GW Basic for the geeks in the crowd. It was basically a basic for MS-DOS. And, basically that it was my entree into sort of computer science. And luckily for someone of my generation, the internet popped up, in the early 90s. And the rest is history. I think that in today's ecosystem and technology world, there's similar interesting opportunities if you know where to find them. The previous sort of generation, what might have been mobile technologies and the sort of emergence of things like, the smartphone. I think now and today, your 9-year-old or 11-year-old would be looking at things like AI as the sort of next big wave in technology. And there's always this kind of interesting sort of opportunity to ride these kind of never-ending waves that sort of appear. So it's quite interesting. I've been doing similar things with my kids. One of the proud moments is when they came and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to build a mobile app." My 8-year-old, how do I do that? It's like, well, you came to the right guy. So interesting times. I think lots of opportunities. So let's get back to Atomic Reach for a moment. So, you've been doing this for a little while. Where do, people sign up? How do they sign up? What does that look like?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, if you are interested in producing content, understanding more about your audience, leveraging AI to help build faster, better communications with more virality and help you really reach an audience in a way that you haven't been able to in the past, then Atomic Reach is a great platform to explore. You can sign up at www.atomicreach.com. We run free trials for individual users working inside of marketing communications departments, as well as we have an enterprise platform for team-based environments where there are lots of different hands and groups touching the communications workflow.
Cool. So atomicreach.com, you get a freemium model, always a smart move in this day and age. So you can sign up, give it a shot, see the power of sort of AI-driven content creation. I've been using it for quite a while. Big fan of it. A lot of the tweets, a lot of the blogs, things I do are I guess filtered through the system. Pretty cool tech. Bradley, thanks for the conversation. It was much more philosophical than I was expecting, but I think that was my favorite part of this conversation today.
I appreciate it, and thanks for having us on, Reuven.
So next week, I'm back in the Silicon Valley. So again, at the Velocity Conference. It's a conference put on by O'Reilly, focused on sort of the next generation of infrastructure, microservices, things like that. So if you're at the conference or you're in the Silicon Valley and want to meet up or be on one of my episodes, feel free to reach out. Always looking for interesting discussions. The more philosophical, the better. I love the sort of high level discussions around the future of technology. Again, this is Reuven. This has been a great discussion today. Thanks again to Bradley and the Atomic Reach team. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.